you inspiring or your vision for your kid? By the way, how old is she?
So I have a 6-year-old.
Okay. And you want her to be an astronaut and to reach Mars, right? It's like, it's nothing that, your regular person go like, my kid should be an astronaut. Usually on Bazooka, Bazooka Joe, we had like by the age of 22, you're going to reach the moon or something like that. But it's like, yeah, she's going to be a Ph.D. in robotics and she's going to deploy that on Mars. Yeah, that's my kid.
Yeah, so it's funny. I always think of this as like, if you think of the parents of Christopher Columbus, right? And when he was like, hey, I'm going to go to America. And they're like, you're going to go where? You're going to go to America? That's going to fall off the planet. And so that was like the pioneers of the time, right? And so like their parents must have been very worried, but at the same time excited about their kid, really pushing the limits of what was known in the world. And so that's what I feel like Mars is like our new America, right? It's like, it's out there. We know it exists. We know how far it takes to get there. So we know a lot more about Mars than I think Christopher Columbus knew about America. But so in a way, encouraging my kid to become an astronaut, to go to Mars is really just a way to sort of say, that's the limit of our knowledge. That's the new America. Like, maybe you can aspire and go sail there. And that's really the goal, right? The goal is to get her excited about those type of boundaries, right? So that's why I want my kid to be an astronaut and go to Mars. Although I hope she really doesn't, but that's the story I'm telling you right now.
Hey, honey, one day when you grow up, I'm going to buy you a 2-year ticket to One Direction. But no, that's really a bad joke. But okay, cool. And now I completely lost the line of thought because, yes. So we were talking about America Vespucci and how Italian went all over the world, find a huge continent. And then, so how would that work? If you are Christopher Columbus, right, a Spanish guy going to the Catholic royalty back then in Spain, what was it? What was that? 1491, 1492, something like that?
Yeah, 1492 was when he arrived. Yeah.
Arrived. So pitching the Isabella and whoever who just, did the conquest, conquered Spain from the barbars, coming in. It's like, I have a better way to reach India. Do you mind sponsoring me? It's like preaching. So back then you had to sponsor some sort of a duke or royalty or kings. Do you want to be my backer, my VC, in order to reach the moon, or a new route, a better and more efficient way to India, to new goals? Yeah, no, I can see that. It's like, yeah, well, instead of that discovering, let's discover Mars and settle it. Cool. So, robotics.
Yeah, so my background is in robotics. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I got very excited about robots, all things robots, and really, I got excited about robots mostly applied to medicine. So I wanted to, I thought maybe we could either, enhance a surgeon with robots, or actually even replace a surgeon with robots. And so I spent a lot of my graduate years, grad school years, building out robots. That would go in all sorts of parts of your body. One of the robots I built actually stuck a needle in your prostate, and so I used to work a lot around prostates.
Oh,
and
God.
so yes, so that's what I said when I got the project. But yeah,
I'm not
so
going.
really.
Oh, there are so many different follow-up questions about that, but for people who don't know, mainly robotics in surgery, it's all about making sure that the hands of the surgeon are stable. Then you'll have the nanobots who will tear you apart from the inside, but that's a different story. But you are more than that, right? It's not just grad school. You did a PhD in that.
Yes, I did a PhD in medical robotics and also a postdoc. So I spent some time at Harvard Medical School building robots, mostly for neurosurgery and for lung and liver. So really sticking needles into different parts of the body with a robot. And for exactly the reason you said, one is for stability and make sure you actually really target the right place. Another one is just it avoids often cutting open. You can just go through very small incisions when you use a robot. So So that was really the idea, that you could make recovery times much shorter by using a robot. So yeah, I used to love, getting in my scrubs and standing next to the doctors, and using the robots and observing how they use their conventional tools and comparing the two. So that was a big part of my life, and I really loved it.
I have a good friend who is a surgeon and a big advocate of the robotics and the play over there. And because I have no idea whatsoever in the space, I always laugh at her that she's using different spoons in order to cut and dig in and out all kinds of things. But that's a side note that most likely I will cut out. But so, from that, right, from robotics, Ph.D. in robotics, in medical robotics, how did you end up in IoT, wearables, and in the space of insurance? I know it's a huge leap here, but hey, we need to do that introduction, cue introduction.
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey, Gilad, to be honest, because my frustration when I was building robots and just medical devices in general is that it takes 10 years for anything to get to market, right? And that's if you're lucky.
I'm sorry. This is where I need to make a small laugh. So you moved from super insane regulation to just regulation. Okay, now please continue.
It's funny. I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. So my frustration was just getting stuff to market. It took ages, and so really I moved out of the medical device industry and into startups. And there my joy was much more around, hey, you can get something to market as quickly as you can build it, assuming people want it, of course. So really that led me to building out Kinetic. And really, what got me excited about building, technology for industrial workers is, I grew up with my mom, who's a nurse, and she got injured a lot during her life. And so it made me realize that, when you get injured at work, you bring that home with you, right? It affects your personal life. It affects your ability to provide for your family. And so that made me realize like what it means for families, for someone to get injured on the job. And so I've always had that in the back of my head. And never really acted on it, to be honest, but really had it in the back of my head. And so I met my co-founder Aditya, who's a wizard in electronics and especially in wearables. And so and he had just he worked at IBM at the time, and he'd built himself a wearable where he could run on a treadmill and read at the same time. So he loved doing that, running and reading. So he would have a sweatband. Audiobooks. They weren't popular at the time. I think that's what made that business not very viable. So he went from building really cool technology that could track how he runs and things in wearables, and then us getting together and really building out a wearable that could help reduce workplace injuries. That was really the goal. And then, I think over this conversation, which is going to be longer, I can tell you how we went from the wearable to insurance, which is a longer journey, but definitely an interesting one too.
Oh, please do tell, because this is, so I think that every conversation has a few elements, right? There is the personal part, then there is like, how the hell did you get from this to insurance? And then there is, okay, so insurance, what is the big problem that you're solving? After that, we talk a little bit more about the company itself, because it's very interesting, right? The challenge with InsurTech Talk, or this show, pod, whatever we may define it, is that we don't have enough carriers because they have challenges with their PR departments, and it's a big enterprise, known and really acceptable in as much as we can, right? And that the story, and there are all kinds of other things, of course, that other listeners would like to know, and we'll reach it. But yeah, so before I'm already jumping to the end. Let's talk about, so you guys met, said, oh my God, I'm a brilliant mechanical engineer, I'm a brilliant electrical engineer,
Yeah,
software,
exactly.
What is it?
Electrical engineer.
EE, we are the best. And then I cannot even keep a straight face saying that. You said, okay, great, we're going to build this product. At the beginning, it was relatively big. Nowadays, you manage to reach a new form factor or a smaller one, the size of a beeper. So from that, how did you reach insurance and what is the problem that you're solving?
Yeah. So let's actually talk a little bit about that first. So first, what we can talk about is the problem we're solving, and really the problem we're solving is that for many workers who do industrial work, so think of the people who do construct, who build our buildings, who deliver the packages every day to your door, who are manufacturing the goods that we buy, right? The people who do a lot of that sort of manual labor that allows all those goods to be produced. It's a very interesting profession where where they have very high demands in terms of productivity, right? So they're expected to do more and more and more, but the training around safety and around how to do their job in a way that allows them to stay healthy and productive is actually fallen behind, right? So really the focus on has been very much on productivity and very little on safety. And so what that means is that these workers are getting injured at incredibly high rates. So to give you an idea, Gilad, like every day in the world, 1 million workers get injured, right? 1 million workers. An enormous amount. And literally like hundreds of billions of dollars get spent every year on paying for those injuries, right? The bulk of that is probably in the US just because of the healthcare system, but it's a huge expense and it's a huge sort of human cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, really, it's just been a lot of the times it's just been considered the cost of doing business. It's just like we hire workers, a percentage of them get injured. It's not great, but it's like the cost of doing
There is a
business. Right?
pyramid for that, right? The risk workforce risk pyramid, something that
That's
at the top,
exactly
of
right.
course, you have death, and then you have all the yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. And in that pyramid, what it tells you is that if you want to avoid the stuff that happens at the top, which are the deaths and the injuries, you need to be focusing at the bottom of the pyramid, which is training, which is safety observations, which is talking to workers and understanding where they're seeing that they're putting themselves most at risk. So those are the things you have to focus on if you want to reduce the injuries and you want to reduce the deaths. So,
Mm-hmm.
what we started doing is saying, well, how can we help these workers not get injured because most of these injuries are preventable. And so what we ended up doing is designing a wearable that that tries to reduce the number one injury type across these workers, which is musculoskeletal injuries, right? So you hurt your back, you tear a muscle, you twist an ankle. Those are the number one, and they're expensive because they take a long time to recover from. And they're very disruptive to companies, right? Because if a worker gets injured and they hurt their back, they could be out for months, right? So it's very, very disruptive. So we set out to sort of say, okay, how can we prevent the maximum number of these injuries? And so we decided to design a wearable to help do that. And really, the wearable, what it does, it allows you to coach a worker in real time. And that's because if you are trying to improve the way you move your body and use your body in a very physical
Mm-hmm.
environment, you can't just be trained for 30 minutes when you start your job, right, at the beginning of the year, and expect that to become a habit, right? It's almost like, think of it like weightlifting, right? If someone gives you a video at the beginning of the year and says like, "Hey, Gilad, this is how you weightlift," and like, now go and weightlift for the rest of the year, you can't. You're gonna get hurt, right?
Yeah.
You need a coach. You need a personal trainer. And so really that's what our device does. Our device sits on your belt. It's a very small form factor, and it gives workers real-time coaching in the form of like a vibration whenever they do a high-risk movement. So if you twist your spine, you get a little vibration. It reminds you that, you shouldn't be doing those movements. And that helps workers use their bodies in the best way to avoid injuries.
So that's mind blowing from a technology standpoint, because what you're telling me is that you have like small device sits on your belt, I assume, and that can read and give you the right nudges to move in a right. How do you teach it? How much we're talking about in terms of training the AI to recognize and adjust to each person? Because it's not everyone is built the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good question. So really what we have is we have some sensors in the device, but they're very standard. They're the sensors you typically have in a phone or in any other sort of, wearable that you might be wearing. And what we do is we train it to recognize certain high risk movements. So things like twisting, jumping off your vehicles, bending too much, things like that. And so, in order to do that, you have to, like you mentioned, any machine learning algorithm requires training. So, we literally had hundreds of workers wear sensors all over their body and wear our device. And we trained our device to recognize these movements, these high risk movements. So now with very high accuracy, we can put this on any number of workers of tall, small, bigger, smaller, and it detects these high risk movements very, very accurately.
Now, I'm sorry that I'm playing a devil's advocate or an investor, and it will be first of all, I don't like IoT because you need hardware. I don't like hardware. You need to produce it. You need to make sure that you update it, firmware, etc., etc. And actually, nowadays, semiconductors, that's a pain in the butt. How do you work with? Can you or how do you? What will be the defensible approach for that?
Yeah.
Is it
So
how easy or how hard is, let's call it, let me rephrase it. What's your secret source that someone else cannot do?
Yeah. So I definitely think that you mentioned hardware. Like hardware is, proverbially the saying is hardware is hard. It is, but we've sort of grown to think of hardware as the advantage, as an advantage, right? So, if you want this device to work and to be effective, it has to work every time. It has to be really robust. It can't break in the middle of the factory, right? And so we tried using phones, using Apple Watches for these type of thing, and you just cannot get those existing devices to work robustly every single time. Um, and so in these environments, right? And so what we ended up doing is having to design our own. And so now that you're designing your own, you can design it in a way that's to your advantage, right? So we have really like a pretty robust algorithm on there. So taking a step back, the number one challenge in this space is workers wanting to wear the device, right? You can
Oh,
imagine that if you're a worker and they give you a device and they're like, hey, wear it, it's a wearable, it's going to stop you from getting injured. You're going to ask a lot of questions. You're going to be like, well, what do you mean by it's going to stop me getting injured? And what are you going to use the data for? And does it got a camera? And does it have a GPS? And am I going to get fired if this thing goes off? Um,
are you
so,
going to
so
spy on me?
really,
Are you going to check how much I do what I do? How many, I don't know, cigarette breaks I'm going to take? Yeah, we don't like to be monitored, but
exactly.
then we have at least 100 of these.
That's exactly right. And the reason we're willing to have those things, Gilad, is because we perceive that they give us value. So, like, yeah, I know my phone monitors me. I know it, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't live without it. So I'm willing to pay that price. And so, in a way, that's the way the workers have to also perceive that this is first. Let me understand what it does, right? And once they understand it and they realize it doesn't have a GPS, it doesn't have. It's like, what value does it give me? Like, is it worth it for me? And so what we
Mm-hmm.
try to do is a couple of things. One is we say like, look, it will stop you from getting injured. And for a lot of people, that's enough and they'll wear it because of that. For others, what we do is we convert it into a game. So the device has a screen and they get to see, oh, today I've done 50 high risk movements, which is way less than what I did yesterday. So I'm getting better, right? So they're competing against themselves. But we also have them compete against their colleagues. So they're like, hey, I've done 30 high risk movements today, but Johnny is number one in our facility, and he's done 20. So I'm going to try and beat him, right? So what we've done is we've taken it to our advantage now and said, all right, well, now that we have to design our own device, let's put a screen on it. Let's give this information to the worker. Let's get them having fun with safety, right? Because that way they'll take it seriously and they'll want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think of these things as how do I design a device that makes people want to wear it every day, right? And that's sort of been the challenge for us. And I don't see it as, oh, it's, semiconductors, they've gone up in price, they're hard to get by. I see it as like, we have the opportunity to design a device that's easy to use, that's discreet and comfortable, and that is fun for the worker to wear every day and use that to our advantage.
Well, these are legitimate questions, especially when we are looking at what's going on today when we are recording this episode, especially from the geopolitics. We are, I think, day 4 or 5 since Russia invaded the Ukraine. There are all kinds of noises coming, China, Taiwan, they're doing their own military drill over there. So, especially, and Taiwan is known for, well, being the producer of many semiconductors and products. So, we always need to think about where things coming. Um, and that's before we talked about oil and gas, but different topic altogether. So, you are, you have your own IoT, your own wearable. Are you also selling insurance or you're selling your technology?
Yeah, so let's get to that journey that I was telling you about before. So what we've
Okay.
done when we started the company, right? We're like, look, we want to have this device on as many workers as possible. That was our mission, right? We want to. I remember saying to my co-founder, look, if I'm on my deathbed and I can say that I saved 1 million injuries, I will die a happy man. So that was our goal from the beginning. We want to save 1 million injuries, right? Or prevent 1 million injuries. And so really the goal has been, I want to get this on every single worker that I can, right? Because I know it will be helpful for them. So when we started, um, who do you sell to first? You sell to early adopters, right? And for us, early adopters meant large Fortune 2000 companies that had budgets to test new technology for safety. So, our biggest client is Pepsi. So they decided to do this. We have another client, Iron Mountain, that's got a great safety culture and could spend money
Mm-hmm.
on something like this. And so they were our early adopters. They put it on thousands of workers, and they are very sophisticated about tracking injury rates and understanding the impact of a technology like this. So they were great early adopters because one, they pushed us on the innovation side. They're like, hey, we want it to do this, we want it to do that. So it really pushed us on the development side. But also they were able to say, look, we've had this in for 2 quarters and this is the impact so far, right? And so after about 3 years of selling to sort of these large self-insured companies, we had enough data that we could then go to an actuary firm and say like, hey, quantify the impact that we've had. So we would give them claims data before our clients use Kinetic and claims data while they were using the device. And the actuary firm came back to us and said, "Look, this is the results. You reduce strain and sprain injuries by an average of 55%, which is incredible.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really impactful. And you reduced lost work days by 72%, right? So that means
That's
less workers are
insane.
getting injured. So it's in insurance terms, it's we reduce frequency and we reduce severity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so at that point, we realize, okay, well, we have enough data now to prove that this is the real deal. So we could do two things. We can continue to sell to these large organizations, which is great, and we continue to do that. But we also suddenly had the opportunity to say, like, how do we really get this out there? And the answer is, workers' comp. So that's what led us to insurance. We, we said, look, if this was free with every single workers' comp policy, adoption would be through the roof, right? Because workers' comp, as you know, workers' comp is mandatory. Every company has to have it. For high hazard industries, it's expensive. It's a massive line item. So we're like, look, if we can give you the wearable for free, included in the policy, and we can reduce your claims by 50%, this is a win for everyone, right? It's a win for us. It's a win for the carrier. It's a win for the policy holder and the employees there. So it's one of these few cases, Gilad, everyone talks about win-win-win, right? And that's the ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But this is actually the case. Like every stakeholder in this like wins, right? So 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 last year we decided, okay, what does that mean then to sell workers' comp? Does that mean I'm going to go and become a carrier? Am I going to become an insurance provider now? And so last year really was like my big education in insurance. I literally spent the year learning about workers' comp, learning about what an MGA and MGU is, learning about underwriting, learning about reinsurance. And so ultimately, all that led to is a great partnership with Nationwide, where we're an MGA and we can offer workers' comp with our product included at no extra charge. And so we started selling that at the beginning of this year. So we're in 2 months in. But that's the
Congratulations.
mission. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, thank you. But that's the mission is like, hey, how can we get this out to the maximum number of people? And insurance is the way to go. I'm convinced of that now.
And now I need to say, a shout out to Brian for making the introduction, and we can continue. No, he's great. He was also he was a guest speaker, I think last year, maybe before that, but a great person to know. But what happens if someone breaks the device? Are you sending a replacement? How is that going to work? Because that's a huge inventory and a supply chain management kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've built so everything that's related to deploying the technology is something that we've sort of built up expertise over the last 3 or 4 years, where we've been sort of deploying to the large organizations. So you're right. I mean, we have that part down
Okay.
where, hey, if something in our dashboard, we provide a dashboard to our clients. They can literally say like, hey, I need this device replaced, and we automatically send them another one. It comes with a shipping label, so they can ship us back the one that's broken. So we've built a nice sort of fulfillment operation that helps send out the product, train the managers and the workers, and then do any sort of maintenance or replacement as needed. When we thought of deploying our devices as part of a workers' comp policy, we didn't initially think about becoming an NGA. We thought, you know what, we'll just partner with the workers' comp carriers and they will provide our product to their clients and they'll pay us. That was the sort of typical approach that we took. And we spent a couple of years doing pilots with a bunch of these carriers, getting great results, and it never really led to anything at scale. And I think, sort of thinking, why is that the case, right? Why could we have good results? And what I've realized is that, carriers, if you think of sort of in workers' comp, right? For every dollar of premium, about 70% is claims and about, 30% is, expenses, right? And there's some profit as well in between. So what carriers have become really good at is one, reducing their expenses. So they're very good at that. And the other one is they're good at investing the sort of premium until they have to pay out the claims, right? And so very few of them are good at deploying technology, right? Which is really what this takes. And so I naturally thought that if we partnered with carriers, they could just deploy the technology to their book of business. But really, we realized that that's just not one of their core expertise. And so for us to really innovate on the idea of having a workers' comp policy with a wearable, we had to be the carrier. We had to be the MGA, because it's very hard for an existing carrier to just change the way they operate and do that, because they're just not great at providing technology.
I think that you touch a very important topic, which, 7 years or 6 years into the insurtech wave, it's still a very tender spot, right? You have all kinds of innovation teams coming in and coming out. Mostly the tier 1 and 2 can handle it, and we've seen that they have been building strategic capital arms, CVCs, even internal innovation teams of EIRs, not just innovation as tech tourism, but actually trying to push innovation. But still, there is so much friction within the company that they cannot really deploy the technology in a meaningful way. And there are all kinds of reasons, right? Not all insurance companies made the same. And it's still a challenge. And yeah, I completely understand. And we've seen companies that in order to innovate, they had to create a separate entity in order to introduce new programs, right? Because they didn't want it to be part of the existing IT department, architecture, or the internal politics. There are all kinds of different reasons for good and bad. No, I think it's you are not the only one that had to step out, and there is still a lot of way to go for the existing carriers. Worst case scenario, insurance as insurance does, mergers and acquisition. That's how big insurance companies grow and increase and add new business or new books. But actually not just big, even now. That's what I think about the Lemonade acquisition of Metromile. But that's a different story. No, actually, same story. What's the size of the team?
So right now we're about 35 people at the company, and we're starting to grow now. Now that we're sort of really investing in this insurance, in the insurance part of the business, we're growing pretty aggressively. So we're hiring a lot of people. We're hiring people to bring on brokers, and we're hiring underwriters. And so I'm having a crash course on like what are the metrics that matter to sort of understand the performance of these folks. And so it's been very interesting to sort of really dive into this space and understand what are the things that actually matter, what are the things that we should be tracking. So that's been very, very enjoyable.
So what are a few tips, and doesn't need to be for IoT MGAs, cyber is a hot topic, so let's use cyber as an example. You're the cyber security, now you want to become an MGA. What are the tips that you can give the CEO or the COO of that new to be existed MGA? What do they need beside a core system? How do they start?
Yeah, so really, it all starts with getting a carrier partner, right? And that's the thing that I learned last year. And I think the thing that you have to be very clear about when you're going out to get a carrier partner is why are you interesting for them? Like, what is the innovation that you bring that they would struggle to ever build by themselves, right? And so in our case, it's, hey, we can reduce losses pretty dramatically, right? And what I found in InsurTech is that a lot of the innovations, if you look at the sort of the every dollar of premium workers' comp, 60, 70% of it is claims, the rest is expenses. A lot of the innovation happens on the expenses, right? It's like customer acquisition, handling of claims, policy administration innovation, right? There's a lot of that stuff that happens, but by nature, that bucket gets squeezed, right? Because that's going to mark the profitability because people don't pay attention to the losses. So I would say that for folks that have an impact in losses, which I think is just such an underrated area, but is the bulk of the premium, right? Ultimately, I think that is really interesting. And so like if you can somehow obviously understand what innovation you're bringing to the carrier, but if it's definitely in losses, I think it's a very easy case to make. And I think what you have to bring, because they're very data-driven industries, is just proof, right? So for us, it meant several years of data and impact on injury rates. If you're impacting losses, I think you've got to somehow bring proof that you do that. And with us, once we had the proof, it wasn't difficult to get a partner carrier who wanted to sort of do an MGA relationship, right? Even to the point where they were willing to let us underwrite. Us underwriting and then taking all the risk, right? So, in terms of that I think speaks to Nationwide as a partner, right? Obviously, they have some guardrails in there which we have to work with, but we want to use the data from our devices to underwrite. So it was in our interest to sort of become experts on the underwriting side and really innovate on that side too. So I think, again, just being clear about where the MGA innovates, building out a carrier partner that can really appreciate that side of it is really key. And then I think the other part is start very targeted. So for us, it's like, look, we're going to start with 6 groups of class codes, right? We're going to start with these specific states. We're going to start with these 25 brokers that we're going to work with. And I think being very targeted allows you to build out a playbook, right? Of saying, okay, well, how do you build broker relationships? How do you underwrite? How do you have an impact on these companies in these class codes? And I think once you prove that out, you can expand. But I think it's really good to sort of be very focused and very targeted at the beginning and then sort of build out from there.
Oh, there are a couple of things that we can talk about here. Yeah, no, because you're going directly with the carrier. Many went through the reinsurance route, and from there they found the carrier or the fronting company, which is also different approach. And I love the fact that you was like, yeah, you need to work with the brokers, you need to work with these guys. You're not coming and shouting or burning whatever on the barricade. We are just going to do direct sales. We are an IoT, but no, we're going to work with brokers, which is fantastic. And
yeah, and also, no, I was going to say you have to choose where you want to put where you want to fight, right? And so for us, the fight is I want to prove that people want a piece of wearable technology for free as part of their policy. I want to prove that brokers want to offer a new product and think they can get new business from it. That's what I want to prove. I want to prove that people want the tech and that it actually impacts their claims. You could then, we could say like, hey, do I want to innovate in the claim side? No, not yet. At least, not now. Do I want to innovate on the distribution side? No, not really. So I think you've got to sort of choose where you put where you put the fight, right? Because you can't fight on all fronts, right? And you talked about geopolitical stuff. So you can't fight on all fronts. So you have to choose the front where you really want to build your own expertise. And for us, that's underwriting and reducing claims. And everything else, I'm happy to sort of go down the normal route in this space because that's not where I want to have an impact just yet.
Fantastic. Okay, so let me ask you the last question that I'm asking everyone who comes on the show. And please give us a recommendation. It can be a book, it can be a show, it can be just a life hack. Whatever you like.
Okay. So this is actually very, very recent for me. So I love that you're asking me this. So the book that's been most transformative to me recently is called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I think especially startup entrepreneurs, like we tend to, and I have kids and I have a wife and I have lots of obligations outside of work. So, work takes a lot of your time. Your obligations outside of work take a lot of your time. So you end up taking time away from either your personal self, like your self-care, or your sleep, which I guess is part of your self-care. And so I've definitely over the years started to sleep less and less. And so what this book made me realize is just the impact that the lack of sleep has, and the importance of really taking care of yourself on that side. So I've loved that book. I've started to go to bed earlier and I feel great. So it's been a very positive influence in my life.
Fantastic. Yeah, I used to have the O-ring, but sadly it lost battery. I changed like the second generation. I didn't buy the third generation. The battery died too fast for my taste. It was fun to follow the metrics, but it was pre-COVID, so with a lot of travel. It didn't really know how to handle jet lags and jumping between time zones. The Polar has a little bit of a sleep detection, but yeah, I will look into that book. But at the same thing, I know that if I'll jump through that rabbit hole again, no, it's not good. The fish.
You travel a lot, Gilad, so I'm sure you can benefit from it. Yeah, that's right.
Well, used to, and actually coming back to it, right? Once June, I started traveling again, and we stopped with the Omicron. Now this week we are traveling. We are back on the wagon or in the air. Really depends. But listen, you live far away, and I need to visit you. I need to jump on a plane all the way to New York. We need to have dinner.
That's right.
Right. Anyway, thank you very, very, very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. So much energy. Loved it. So great.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. I really enjoyed it, Gilad. Thank you.